Thank you, Abby. Right? So when you look at the contingency removal form, this is kind of like a roadmap of all the little nuances in the contract that the buyer has to adhere to as far as time frame. So, and if you go back and look, the initial deposit, it's in paragraph 3D1 of the grid. Right? So then you could go back, okay, when were you supposed to have that done? 3 business days. Oh, I did that, right? So you could utilize this as kind of your roadmap as a buyer as well. Or again, as a seller, these are all the reasons they could submit a notice to perform.
So we can do this 2 days prior on all of this.
You can submit, the notice to perform can be delivered to a buyer 2 days prior to the due date of the action. So if the action is due on Friday, right, then we could serve that notice to perform today, because they would have all day Thursday and all day Friday to perform. Sellers could actually cancel on Saturday morning. Okay, if we wait till Friday to submit that notice to perform, now we've lengthened it. So they've got all day Saturday to perform and all day Sunday to perform. But if the day of performance falls on a weekend or a holiday, it rolls to the next business day. So they have all day Saturday, all day Sunday, and all day Monday to perform. Seller can cancel on Tuesday if you served it on Friday, the day of performance.
Wait, so if there's a holiday, it doesn't count?
If there's a weekend or holiday and the last day for the notice to perform falls on that day, then they have the next full business day for that notice to perform.
Boo. So it's only business days.
It's not business days because the weekends count. I can serve a notice to perform on Saturday. Sunday would count. Monday would count. We could still cancel on Tuesday.
Okay,
But if we serve it on Friday, Saturday counts, Sunday counts, but Sunday's the day of performance. So they have all day on the next business day to finish that day of performance.
So never do it so that it goes through on the weekend.
It just really pay attention. I mean, sometimes it's unavoidable, right? Like, what are you going to do? So there you go. Okay, so that's your contingency or the notice to buyer to perform. It's a great roadmap of, did we do everything we were supposed to do to make sure that the seller has no right to be able to cancel this contract? And it references exactly where to find it. Anything with a D is the grid. What was that question? Oh, I don't know.
No, I was just gonna say I always get dates confused with, like, I need to like really write them down because I always get them confused.
And your
like, when do weekends count? When do weekends not count?
So weekends and holidays always count for days, except for the deposit. The deposit is the only thing in the contract that is business days only, because obviously you can't make a deposit to title and escrow on a weekend. They're closed. So those don't count. So the deposit is always business days. Everything else is calendar days, except for the day of performance. If the close of escrow, if a contingency removal, if anything falls on a weekend or holiday, it rolls to the next business day. So if the close of escrow was on Saturday, it's now the close of escrow is on Monday.
Okay.
Claudia, you said what Ametry is helpful for keeping track of it? Oh, it calculates it for you and syncs with your Google Calendar. So check that out.
Oh, thanks. Will do.
There you go. All right. Any other questions on that before we hop back into our other transaction action flow kind of timeline?
Thank you.
Yep. All right. So hopping back in to, I can't see the top of my toolbar. All right. So hopping back into that list that we started last week. So remember, we were talking about buyer contract to close. We talked about all the things that you should do kind of leading up to entering into contract. Kind of the first few things, like what happens day 0. We talked about the congrats email. We showed you kind of Glide and through disclosures, well, Homelight Listing Management, Disclosures IO. And we made it through day 1, all of kind of the things, and we kind of stopped at day 3. There's so much that happens in the first few days of the accepted contract that you need to keep on track with. So just kind of keep that in mind. I will share this again in the chat box so that you have the link to this form. Keep in mind that when you open it, there's two tabbies on the bottom. One is for a listing transaction and one is for a purchase transaction. So you may need to, it usually defaults to opening to the listing transaction. So if you're like, that doesn't look like what Amy had open, it's the tab at the bottom. So anyways, there's a lot of things. Also, when it comes to buyers, like the first like week and a half is super busy, and then it kind of gets less busy because now the lender's finishing the loan thing. So you kind of feel like you're missing things, and that's normal. But when we get to day 3, hopefully by now, because we, made that request for the seller disclosures again on day 1, hopefully by now you've gotten the seller disclosures, or whenever you have those, you want to review those disclosures for completeness. And what does that mean? A complete disclosure should have every box checked, every explanation completed. If they marked a box yes, everything should be dated and signed. Okay, dated, signed, boxes all checked, and explanations given for any yes answers. That would be a complete disclosure. If there's a box missing, if there is a explanation missing, you want to kick that back to the sellers or the seller's agent and say, hey, we're missing the explanation for this item, and this item, or hey, you missed a couple dates here. Okay, that's going to make the disclosures complete. If on the TDS, that transfer disclosure statement, if the box is checked, agent to provide AVID form, the agent visual inspection disclosure form, and the agent hasn't yet provided that AVID form, that TDS is not complete until that AVID is there. Okay, so kind of keep that in mind if you have a listing. What I usually recommend doing is on your TDS, you mark the box, agent notes the following, and that gives you some lines there. And I always put agent notes nothing at this time. That doesn't remove you of your obligation to complete the agent visual inspection disclosure. It just removes it from the obligation to provide it as part of the completed TDS. Or you could do a brief highlight, like, because you're looking for material defects. So you could always in that little box put, agent notes the following: garage door is dented, there's stains in carpet. And then you could leave that. You would still want to provide the full AVID form, but now it's not tied into that TDS, making that TDS complete. Okay, so if that box is checked and there's no AVID, the TDS is not complete. So as far as the seller delivering those statutory disclosures and when your contingency time frame is due, if the sellers deliver completed disclosures more than 5 days prior to the scheduled removal of the review of seller disclosures contingency, then we proceed with the contract. If we're on 1 day before that contingency removal deadline and we have yet to receive the fully completed disclosures, once the seller provides those to you and your buyer, usually via electronic delivery, via email, you have an additional 5 days to review those disclosures that have been provided, or the buyer can cancel the contract based on new material defects that have been disclosed. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind. So that's this review disclosures for completeness. We want to make sure every box is checked, every date is given, every signature line is completed, and that you have everything that you want in there or that you need for your file. The next step on day 3 would be to upload those disclosures to DIO, which is Disclosures.io, or that HomeLight Listing Management file. They changed the name. I haven't updated it in here, but I upload all my disclosures into HomeLight Listing Management. Next, we're going to receive the prelim and the CC&Rs. Okay, so hopefully by now Title's emailed you over a copy of that preliminary title report. I had one pulled up last week because I wanted to show you guys where to find the CC&R. So let's see if that's still in my downloads list. Otherwise, I will find one for you. Heritage, yep, fabulous. All right, so here is your preliminary title report. You're going to get this from the title company. They all look very similar. And you want to make sure you review this and upload it. And things that you're looking for is you're making sure that the names on the preliminary title report match the names of the sellers on the contract. If not, questions should be asked. Okay. Things may need to be updated. You may need an addendum to clarify sellers' names. Like this one has a middle name. It may have just been Jason Linderman on the actual contract. So we may need to update that the seller is Jason Lee Linderman. Usually it's not as important for a seller that the middle name is in there or not in there, as long as we got first and last names. But maybe on title to maybe the wife has a maiden name listed. Maybe they weren't married, or there was no name change, and now the name has changed or been hyphenated. We may need to update that. So just make sure that it matches. Down here, as we scroll through, you want to look at these numbers. These are the important things on the preliminary title report. We have taxes and assessments. It just tells you, hey, there could be something on there. Here's the general taxes. It tells you what's paid and what's not paid. I don't really care about that because title is going to make sure it's paid before the close of escrow. That's why we hire a title company. That's why we do it through escrow. Okay. Supplemental lien for supplemental taxes. Usually these are kind of the first 3 to 4 items are kind of about taxes and supplemental taxes, just making sure it's covered. Here's the Community Facilities District Clean Energy. Now keep in mind, anytime there's a hyperlink, if you click on that hyperlink, it will open up whatever that document was in that file. Okay, so here it just talks about the boundaries of the Clean Energy Initiative. Okay, so if you were being really diligent in your job, what you would do is you would click this hyperlink, hit download, and then I would upload this to my HomeLight listing management file so that it was in there separate, so that I'm not depending on my buyer to click on those blue links in the preliminary title report to see what everything is. So I may go ahead and update this. That way they're made aware that there's a boundary territory within the county of Solano for this Community Facilities District. I don't even know what that means. I don't really care. It's not my job to figure it out in entirety, but I might want to upload that separately just so my buyers can say that I made them aware of it. Okay. Going back to that preliminary title report, we're going to continue down. Number 5 is just special tax, which is now a lien. Again, more special taxes. These are all for like the special things that have been added to the tax roll. Municipal service charges. So this is, hey, if they haven't paid their trash bill or their water bill, that's going to need to get paid at the close of escrow. Again, this is why I have title and escrow, is they take care of making sure all of this is taken care of. The next one here is terms and provisions. This is has something to do with some agreement with the city of Dixon. I don't really care about this. We're just going to keep on keeping on through here. Here's the agreement for relocation, reconstruction, and protection of facilities with developer. I don't really care about that because it doesn't necessarily apply anymore. Here's a reciprocal easement. It does, Claudia, it defaults to the seller to take care of their tax balance, as long as you go through title and escrow. Here's your reciprocal easement. So if there's an easement recorded on your property for something outside of, there's usually easements recorded for utilities. I was just trying to find, here's your public services utility is number 12, but these are additional easements. This one actually kind of had like a shared driveway situation. You may want to click on these easements and include them as a separate document so that your buyers can review those items. It's not super common to have easements in town for anything but utilities, but out in the country, it happens a lot. You cross somebody else's property, there's an easement recorded there, so you may want to have a copy of it. Or like over in the North Village, I was like, what's that community called? Where you got all those shared driveways? Those are all easements, where you've got those houses that kind of surround a common driveway area. There's an easement recorded on that, so you may want to print that up, and all we have to do is just click on it. It'll pull up that document for you so that you can, again, review it. You can download it, and then you can upload it or send it over to the buyers for review, just so they can have that information in here. The other thing that you're going to find down here is number 13, your covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Those are your CC&Rs. Okay, so those are what the restrictions are on the property. Now, keep in mind that oftentimes, right, most in-town properties have CC&Rs. Those are covenants, conditions, and restrictions. It's made to uphold the value of the neighborhood, not going to be confused with an HOA or a homeowners association, where there's actually a board of people that monitor that association and make sure that the members are upholding the rules of the HOA. Okay, similar type situation, but one has a board of directors that actually monitors, holds people accountable. There's fines that can be assessed for not adhering to those HOA requirements versus CC&Rs. Your only course of action if somebody in your neighborhood isn't adhering to a CC&R is to contact the buildings division in the city and ask them to enforce it. And sometimes they will, and sometimes they won't. But again, we want to click on these. We want to download these, and I always upload these as a separate document. So this just goes through the CC&Rs of this property. These are things you're going to find things in here. Ultimately, like you can't have barnyard animals in your backyard, right? So things like that are what you're going to find in here. You can't paint your house bright purple, right? You can't have trash in your front yard. You can't leave a trailer parked in your driveway for 6 weeks. Things like that will be things that you find in your CC&Rs. Okay. So just kind of keep that in mind. You want to make sure that your buyers take time to review this information. So I always upload it to my HomeLight listing management files, a separate document from my preliminary title report. So that's when we look at that checklist, that's what that's talking about. Like go through that prelim, download the things that are important and upload them so that the buyers can review them, or email them over to the buyers for review, because they're important items, easements, CC&Rs, if there's, part of the clean air initiative or a boundary for facility improvement or something is happening, like just upload it. When in doubt, send it over separate, right? Cover yourself. Any questions about that? The prelim and the CC&Rs. All right. Hold on. I just have to move that away again. And then we're going to go back to our checklist. We're going to do this. There we go. Fabulous. All right. So when we look at the checklist here and it talks about receive prelim and CC&Rs and then upload prelim and CC&Rs to DIO. That's what I'm talking about. Open that prelim, look for anything, pull off this, it's the least CC&Rs and anything else. We also have the NHD report, or the Natural Hazard Zone Disclosure Report. So when we look at that NHD report, this one's through My NHD. Keep in mind that our office has a partnership with My NHD. That if you list it appropriately on your contract, it's called like one disclosure, I believe. And that's backed by My NHD. And then it helps our office just a little bit when you choose it. But you have this report here. And then why I pulled this up is, number one, I upload this entire report to my HomeLight listing management file, or I send the whole report to the buyer, right? So I send that whole report to the buyer. I'm going to review it and make sure that there's no red flags on here that I should draw the attention to. Like if it was in a special flood zone, because now I know that now we need flood insurance. Area of potential flooding. Keep in mind that this is not uncommon for anywhere in Solano County to have this marked yes, because we're close to the levee systems of Sacramento. Okay. And so this is, hey, it could be if the dams failed, if the levees failed, we could all flood. All right. And if you want more information, it talks about it further in the report. High fire hazard severity zone. That would be when that other disclosure, the fire hardening disclosure, would be required. Upland fire, earthquake fault zone, seismic hazard zone. Just so you know, it's always not yet released by the state. I always instruct my buyers to just be aware that you live in the state of California. You're moving to the state of California. You're probably in a seismic hazard zone. Okay, just take that into account. But the other thing that's really important on this page, and you usually get it when the email comes over to you from the NHD company, but sometimes we don't see that email. But down here, we have the mynhd.com booklets and combined booklets, because part of, we're going to open this in Chrome, part of our responsibility as either listing agents or buyer's agents is to make sure that our buyers get all the necessary government required booklets So, right. So we've got the guide to residential environmental hazards for homeowners, home buyers, landlords, and tenants. You got hazardous waste, you've got a lead-based one, there's a mold one, a radon one. So there's all these different booklets that your buyers are supposed to get. They're gonna sign, when they sign that NHD report, they're signing that they agree, that they have received a copy of these. But again, we can't take our buyer's word that they're gonna click hyperlinks. They may not even know what a hyperlink is. So you always want to go in there. In fact, you could just save this once and then just automatically upload it to all your HomeLight listing management files, or make sure you always send it over to your buyers. You don't have to download it each time. We have the guide to homeowners earthquake safety. You've got, it talks about the earthquakes. We're required to give that to our buyers. Technically the seller's required. You've got the home energy rating. So all those things are in here. If you were being really diligent, this is 121 pages. I would save it individually. So I would save like, hey, what's my California Energy Commission booklet? I would save those pages separate from the earthquake hazards, separate from the residential hazards, and I would upload them all individually. That way I know that my buyer got into that HomeLight listing management file. They had a chance to review all of these documents, and I'm going to have them sign the cover page of my HomeLight listing management file, which lists everything in that file, acknowledging that they received and reviewed those documents. Okay, but that link is usually on that page, the signature page of that NHD report. Okay, any questions about that? Okay, your NHD report, again, if you had questions like, hey, what's an area of potential flooding? Here's yes. We can just come down. So this was the summary page where the signatures go. Now we're into the full report. If you just click on, hey, what's page 3? It's going to take you down there and it'll tell you what that looks like. And they can even click the map. So if you ever have questions about what something is, your buyer asks you a question, here's how to direct them to get that information. Okay. This is actually the Monticello Dam, which would be Lake Berryessa. There you go. Fabulous. Any questions about that NHD report or where to find the residential hazards booklets? Keep in mind too, second little thing here is in the CAR Forms library. See if I can get that to stay at the bottom of my screen. So if we go, oh, let's see. In your CAR Forms library, these California booklets are in there. You just have to look for them. So if we go to our Forms library, here we have the California Association of Realtors. If you click that down button, you've got the California EPUBs right here. That's where you're gonna find the consumer's guide or to disclosure requirements. You've got the let's keep going. The residential environmental hazards, protect your family from lead, your home energy rating pamphlet, your homeowner's guide to homeowner safety, your earthquake hazards report. It's all in that CAR Forms library as well. You just have to know where to find it. And you do it by going to the Forms library and then you click on the little drop down for your library and choose the EPUBs. So that's how you would find those inside. There's nothing to sign on those forms. By signing the NHD report, they're acknowledging that they've received a copy of them, but that's where you find them in case you ever needed to and you couldn't find it on your NHD report. All right, so that's right here. We've got receive NHD, upload NHD or natural hazard disclosure report to DIO or HomeLight listing management files. Here's all those pamphlets that I was just talking about. Upload all pamphlets to DIO. If applicable and you're in an HOA, you're going to get all of the HOA docs from the homeowners association. So that's going to come from the seller. And we want to upload those as well to that DIO or that HomeLight listing management file, or just send them over to your buyer. However you're going to do business, just make sure your buyer gets a copy of those. Your HOA docs should include your meeting minutes for the last 12 months. So any meetings that were held, they have minutes for those as part of the HOA requirements. You're supposed to get a copy of those. You're supposed to get the current finance statement from the HOA that shows what they're spending money on, how much money they have in reserves, the reserve account statement. You're also supposed to get a copy of the rules and regulations and any other pertinent information. But those are your main 3 things that you're going to get: your finance statements, your CC&R or your rules and regulations, and then the last 12 months worth of meetings. They're also supposed to make you aware, just so you know, if you have any assessments that have been voted in that haven't gone into effect yet, that should be covered as well. It's going to be in those rules and regulations that goes over what they can and can't do inside that HOA and what the HOA does for the homeowners themselves. Okay, so if you ever have questions when it comes to like a condo community or townhome community on whose responsibility is the roof or the exterior of the property, some HOAs cover the exterior of the property, some do not, right? So it's important. You can always find it inside those HOA documents. Sometimes there's restrictions on rental units. Sometimes there's restrictions on the types of animals and pets that you can have. So all that stuff is going to be in there. Okay. By day 5, I'm also going to confirm that the appraisal has been ordered. So when I checked into it up here, if the appraisal hadn't been ordered, or I haven't been notified by day 3 that I've got it on the schedule, I'm checking back in with that lender to double check. Hey, you said the appraisal was ordered. I'm just confirming, because both myself nor the listing agent haven't heard from the appraiser yet to get that scheduled, right? And always check in with the listing agent first, because usually the appraiser is going to contact that listing agent. That's going to be the primary contact for most appraisals. Okay. So that wraps us up on day 3. Any questions on kind of what happens on day 3 of the contract? The good news is we had like day 1, and then you got a break on day 2, and then we're back at it for day 3. Okay. Moving on to day 5. Again, you get a break again. You can breathe on day 4. You might have inspections scheduled, so you might not get to breathe. And you can make up anything that you didn't get taken care of on day 3, right? It's not like always happens on day 3. That's just kind of ideal. Remember, this is our ideal time frame. You're going to confirm that all parties have logged into that HomeLight listing management file. It shows us whether they've logged in or not. It doesn't tell us when the last time was or what they clicked on, but it does tell us whether they've accessed it or not. You just want to make sure that they've actually logged in, check in with them, make sure to send them that link again if they haven't, and encourage them, say, hey, this is where I'm uploading all the seller disclosures, all the reports and inspections, anything pertinent to this transaction is all going into this file. So please make sure you click on this link and that you know how to access it. If you're having problems, let me know, right? We want to make sure they're getting in there and seeing that stuff. Next, I'm going to prepare that buyer's inspection election and the buyer's inspection waivers for signatures. Okay. So remember, we talked about on day 1 or day 0, we're going to send out that buyer inspection election through the Glide process so that buyers can think about what kind of inspections they might want to have about the property. Then we're going to have a conversation with them about those items. I'm going to send it to them for signatures. I don't ever worry about changing it, but we're going to have a conversation about what they checked or what they didn't check, because there might be things we recommend that they didn't check they want done, and I'm going to confirm. The buyer's inspection waiver form, the BIW, says that, hey, here are the forms that we always recommend, or here are the inspections that the agent or the brokerage have recommended. The buyers have opted not to have these, and they're signing that they know that this is against the advice of the brokers. Again, on my intro email, I outline what those, at least minimum, usually is 5 required inspections that I recommend. It's not required, just recommended inspections. You've got the whole house inspection, the pest inspection, the HVAC inspection, the roof inspection, and the sewer lateral inspection. So those 5 should get recommended on every single house unless there is no HVAC system, which is rare in your guys' area for a house not to have an HVAC system. I would always recommend those. If there's a pool, you might also recommend a pool inspection. If it's on the side of a hillside, you may recommend having the hill stability inspected. If there's a lot of dead trees, you might recommend an arborist inspection, right? So there's lots of other things that you may want to recommend based on the property, but those 5, your home, your pest, your roof, your HVAC, and your sewer lateral should get recommended on every single property, okay? If it was in the country, you might want to recommend a septic or well inspection. And if the buyers don't have any of those inspections that I have recommended, I'm going to have them sign the buyer's inspection waiver, and I'm going to write those in. So it defaults, I think it talks about home inspection, a pest inspection, and I think there's one other that defaults, and then there's a line that you can fill in the other recommended inspections. I'm going to fill those in. And even if the seller has already had the inspections, I'm still going to recommend that the buyer may want to investigate getting their own inspections done. Okay. Just to make sure they're covered. So that's the BIE and the BIW, the buyer's inspection election form through Glide, and the BIW for the waiver of anything that I recommended that they did not decide to have. We're going to send all the disclosures to the buyers for signatures 5 days before that the disclosures or the inspection contingencies are due. Okay, I want them to have days to make sure that they not only did they see it in the home light listing management file, but now they have days before it's due to review and sign those disclosures. That way, if there's any hiccups when they start reviewing them because they didn't actually look at them previously and they go to sign them, we've got some days to work through that or to get another inspection ordered if they need something for further inspection. Okay, we're going to prepare the repair request if required. Okay, my goal is to get that prepared at least 3 days before the physical investigation contingency is due. I want to have that prepped and ready to go. I don't want to be waiting on the last day to send that over to the listing agent because nothing irritates a listing agent more than getting it at the 11th hour. So I try to get it over a little sooner so that they have time to review it and make a decision. Not only that, but I don't want to like delay 2 weeks to find out that the sellers aren't going to do any of the repairs my buyers want. And now we're going to cancel the contract and I just wasted a whole week's worth of time. We could have figured that out a week ago, right? We could have been in contract on a different property already. So keep that in mind. We're going to check in with the lender on the appraisal completion, right? So this is 5 days before that appraisal contingency is due. Oftentimes that rolls somewhere between day 5 and day 7, day 5 and day 9. I was like, what day is that? Somewhere in there, right? Usually our contingencies are somewhere between like 10 and 14 days if we have them, sometimes shorter, sometimes longer. But we're going to make sure that, hey, has that appraisal been completed yet? We're going to keep checking in. We want to make sure, number one, that it came in at value, and number two, that there aren't any conditions. I've seen more conventional appraisals come through recently with conditions on them than I've ever seen in my entire career. So the conventional appraisers are getting picky. I don't know if it's the appraisers or the lenders. I think appraisers just want more money, so they want to go out and have a reinspection fee, but that's just me. It's probably not true. So if you're an appraiser and you're watching this, I'm just making a joke. It's funny. All right. So you're gonna complete your commission demand request, right? Day 5, make sure that commission demand has been submitted to the powers that be, that your transaction coordinator submitted it. Get the ball rolling on that, because worst case scenario is you forget about this commission demand and then we're like at the close of escrow, everybody's signed, we're closed. You're like, where's my check? And title's like, I don't have your commission demand. You're like, oh, whoops, I forgot that. So do it on day 5. Don't wait until day 30. Okay. So complete that commission request. You can always change it later if something tweaks or changes, but this way it's done and ready to go. On the investigation contingency, you're going to remove that investigation contingency. Now, keep in mind that on a buyer transaction, I like to drag my feet. So if my contingency is due today and the seller has not yet asked for it, I'm going to have my buyers sign off. I'm going to say, hey, buyers, it's time to remove some contingencies. Here are the contingencies that are due. Are you guys ready? And they're going to be like, yeah, we're ready. Be like, perfect. I'm going to send that over to you for signatures. My buyers are going to sign it, and I'm going to put it in my little file of signed documents that I don't send over to the seller. I'm just going to sit on it until the seller starts badgering me. If you're a seller and I'm on the other side on the buyer transaction, I'm going to apologize in advance. You're probably going to need to send me a notice to perform before I actually remove contingencies. Why? Because I'm protecting my buyer. If day 14 comes and goes and my inspection contingency was due to be removed and we don't remove it, in the state of California, it doesn't automatically fall off. You have to remove it in writing. So until I actually remove that in writing, my buyers can cancel because the fence is gray, right? Like it doesn't matter. My buyers can cancel based on that contingency. So I let those contingencies roll as long as possible. Oftentimes I'm removing the contingencies at the end of the escrow period because a lot of listing agents don't ask for it, or they don't badge. They might ask for it and then they forget about it. And then I don't hear from them again about it until the close of escrow. So I will sit on those contingency removal forms and not actually send them over to the seller until they start badgering me and pestering me and we're really, truly ready. Claudia, did you have a question?
I'm like here over, like just anxious, ask like, so here's my understanding of how this works. So if they don't ask, you still need to, do you have to do an addendum that says that we did it later? Or because somebody basically, so I was doing this and an agent was like, oh no, for compliance reasons, can you just do an addendum that says that you asked for an extension because she didn't catch on for a few days later. So do you have to do an addendum?
Number one, you would never do an addendum for that. You would actually do an extension of time. So if they wanted you to complete the extension of time and they're going to sign off on it, then sure, whatever. But no, it's not a requirement. It states clearly in the contract that those contingencies have to be removed in writing, and they're not actually removed until they receive that contingency removal. And I didn't ask for an extension. They could have asked me for that contingency removal at any time. So I've never been asked for an extension of time for a contingency removal, and I sit on them all the time until the close of escrow.
But you have them sign them so that the date on it reflects the day that they should have submitted, right?
No, I just have my buyers sign it and give it to me so that the buyers feel like they've given their rights away to canceling the contract. I'm committing my buyers is really all I'm doing. It has nothing to do with the date or anything else. It's just, I'm letting my buyers know that, hey, contractually, it's time to do this. Are you guys ready to do this? Yes, we are. Perfect. I'm going to send that over to you for signatures. My buyers believe that it's already been removed. But if last minute the buyers came back and like, oh my gosh, Amy, you'll never believe it, but we lost our jobs. And be like, oh, no problem. Well, now you don't qualify for the loan. Yeah, but we already removed our contingencies. Well, I had you sign the forms, but we didn't actually send them over yet. So now you don't qualify for the loan. We just need the lender to send us a notice that you don't qualify. You're not going to be obligated to buy this house. And they're going to be like, and you're going to get your deposit back. And they're going to be like, oh my gosh, you're amazing, right? So I let them believe that those contingencies have been removed is the only reason I have my buyers sign those. And then I don't actually send them over to the seller until I get badgered for it, because I just want to delay as long as possible in case the unthinkable happens as part of the last week of that escrow.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Now, oftentimes on the close of escrow, if we delay the close of escrow for some reason, oftentimes the lender or the listing agent will want a extension of time. Again, it's not even required there either. However, oftentimes because the lender needs it, then we do it anyways. So just kind of keep in mind, I see that happen with the close of escrow often on change of dates there versus the contingency removals. We're going to review on around day 14, right? So this is usually right about the time that those contingencies are due or those documents are due back. Keep in mind that returning the seller signed disclosures is a contractual obligation of the buyer as part of the contract. That's one of those things that the sellers can actually issue a notice to perform for because you haven't returned the seller disclosures. So 5 days prior to that being due, I'm going to send those over to the buyers for signatures. Once the buyers have signed them, I'm going to review them and make sure I didn't miss any signatures or any boxes or anything that my buyers were supposed to complete. So I'm going to make sure those are complete. And then we're going to send those signed disclosures over to the listing agent. Okay, so this is all about day 14. So right, those first 5 days, there was so many things to do. Then you kind of have those inspections. Remember, we scheduled those inspections. So you've got the inspection happening and the appraisal happening and things going on with the loan. There's things going on in the background that aren't on this list because we already scheduled those. So we talked about it, right? And then come day 14, that's usually when our contingencies are scheduled to be removed. So keep in mind that this day might change. The default on the contract is 17 days, not 14. So if you change it, you need to adjust. But here we're going to review those disclosures for completeness on the buyer side. We're going to send all those signed disclosures back to the listing agent. We're going to finish negotiating any repair requests or price reductions, right? Hopefully by now we've gotten the appraisal back. We found out when you get the appraisal back, it's going to come back to the lender. I usually ask for a copy of it as a buyer's agent. I like to see appraisals. I think they're fascinating. I like to look at the adjustments the appraisers make, how much they give for solar or pools or a patio cover. I just think they're fascinating. Usually I do like a appraisal packet. So I just like to see, or I have an idea kind of what comps I would use. So I like to know what the I'd like to know what the appraiser's thinking, right? So I'd like to see copies of those appraisals. So I usually ask for a copy of it, but we want to make sure the appraisal came in at value. at or above value. Keep in mind, oftentimes the appraisers aren't going to come in way above contract price. They're going to come in right around contract price, even if the property's worth more, because it raises red flags if they come in too far above that contract price. We also want to make sure that the appraiser appraised that property with no conditions, that it's appraised as is, not subject to repairs, right? So we always want to verify that with the lender. And we want to make sure that lender has submitted it through their QC or their quality control or to the underwriter for review to make sure no red flags were raised on that appraisal. Assuming all those things are good, we can remove that appraisal contingency when due. Now, keep in mind that you are not required to give a copy of that appraisal to the listing agent on conventional loans. Okay, the seller does not get a copy of that appraisal on conventional loans. Also, keep in mind that if the appraisal comes in higher, under no circumstances does the seller have the ability to try to negotiate the contract higher. Okay, if the appraisal comes in low, the buyer can try to renegotiate the price based on the appraised value if it came in below contract price, or if we have the appraisal contingency in place, the buyer has the right to cancel the contract if the seller's not willing to negotiate. If we're in contract at 500,000 and the appraisal comes in at 480,000, the reason it's important is that the lender is going to loan money based on 480,000, not 500,000, if that's where the appraisal came in. So if we were coming in with a down payment of 10%, which was going to be 50,000, right? 10% of 500,000 is 50,000. Now our appraisal's at 480,000. Our 10% is going to be 48,000, but now we have this $20,000 gap between the contract price and the appraised value, and our lender's only going to loan based on 80% of 480,000. So you're going to have to come in with 10% there, plus 20,000 to get to the contract price of 500,000. So your buyers now, instead of coming in with 50,000, are going to have to come in with 48,000 plus 20,000, so $68,000 to close escrow if we leave the contract price at the original contract price when the appraisal comes in low. That's why we try to renegotiate the contract. It's going to come out of your buyer's pocket. Okay. In addition, if the appraisal comes in high, so let's say that we were in contract at 500,000 and the appraisal comes in at 510,000. And let's say we were trying to negotiate repairs with the seller that were really important to the buyer, but the seller's not willing to cover repairs. We could potentially, and you always want to check with your lender first, that, hey, lender, can we bump the purchase price to 510,000 and ask for a $10,000 credit from the seller? Now it's not costing the seller anything for that credit. The buyers are still getting the credit. It's going to cost them, $20 more a month for a $10,000 price increase for our buyers. And now they're getting $10,000 back and keeping that money in their pocket. Okay, so you could potentially do that if the appraisal came in high. However, again, on a conventional loan, we don't have to give a copy or disclose the appraised value to the seller. So if the appraisal comes in above contract price, usually what I said, yes, we're at contract price, right? The appraisal came in at least at contract price or whatever it is. You don't have to tell them it came in higher. Now, if you had an FHA or a VA loan per the contract, the seller is obligated to get a copy of that appraisal if they ask for it. Or you can just give it to them. The reason that is because the appraisal goes with the property. So if the seller were to cancel that property, that contract for any reason, let's say we had a VA buyer and a new VA buyer enters into contract on the property, that old appraisal stays with the property. It's going to come into play again. So VA and FHA appraisals, the seller can request a copy of it. Technically per the contract, you're supposed to give it to them, but most people don't ask. So I usually only turn over the appraisal if they ask for it. But yeah, you can't tell them they can't have it on a VA or FHA. We're on conventional. You can say, no, sorry, we're not going to give you a copy of the appraisal. You can do that with conventional. The other reason that you may want to turn over a copy of the appraisal is if there are conditions on that appraisal, then you would want to submit a repair request with the lender required repairs and a copy of the appraisal so that the seller could verify the repairs as required by the appraiser. So that would be another instance where no matter what your loan type is, they would get a copy of it if you ask for repairs associated with that appraisal. Okay. It is 10:02. So, let's see, we have seller signed, we got that. So we're down to day 15. We are going to finish this. I mean, I hate to say next week, but I'm going to push it to next week. So I don't know what our schedule was next week, but we're going to finish contract to close. I should have known that I was going to need more than 2 days to get through this because there's so much information in here. So let's look at what next week's schedule is. We have establishing your values and your why. We have, oh, that one I'm going to cancel anyways, probably. All right. The backup offer addendum. All right, we're going to cover this. Ooh. No. We're going to cover this next Tuesday. So we're supposed to be covering our value your why because we're into October. We'll do maybe a special training on that. So we're going to cover buyer contract to close. We're going to finish out buyer contract to close next Tuesday. Keep in mind the schedule is fluid, as I mentioned in our Facebook group and on our Slack channel. If you're not on Slack, get on Slack because we update things on there, as well as there's a pinned link for these trainings on there. The schedule is kind of fluid right now. We're going through some medical stuff with my daughter. So we have doctor's appointments being scheduled. So I had one last week that then got moved to this week, that then got moved to next week. So we have 2 appointments next week. So the schedule's changing a little bit. I'm going to verify with Ed. I believe he's covering the backup offer addendum on Thursday for me. In fact, would you guys like to finish this tomorrow? Because I can replace the forms training tomorrow. I don't think it was anything super important tomorrow. Let's see. Today's Wednesday, Thursday. We had the HID and the BIW. Oh, that falls in line with this anyway. So why don't we finish buyer contract to close tomorrow? We'll do part 3 of buyer contract to close tomorrow, along with the HID form and the BIW, because both of those are required for buyers as part of the RPA. Well, they're not, the BIW is not necessarily required, but we talked about that one today. I'll show you how to fill it out. Super simple. So we'll finish contract to close tomorrow. We'll cover the HID and the BIW form as well. And then there'll be a little tweaking for the schedule next week, mainly that we don't have class on Wednesday because we have to leave for our doctor's appointment. So anybody have any questions before we wrap up today? Sorry for the confusion on the scheduling. All right, make sure if you're still on that you log your attendance. There's a link in the chat box. And yes, Ralph, absolutely. It will be recorded tomorrow. That recording gets posted into my YouTube channel. So if you subscribe to the YouTube channel, you'll be made aware when it gets uploaded and released on the YouTube channel. It usually takes either later this week or probably next week is when it'll be released. And then we also have a document that you can find in a couple different places. It may be on the general Slack. I'm not sure. If not, I'll have Abby add it to the general Slack of all the training classes and the links to those trainings so that you can look through the list and then just go straight to that recorded training that way as well. So absolutely, you can get a recorded copy of it, but let's finish this up. Tomorrow we'll pick up on day 15 and we'll cover you day 15 through the close of escrow. Hopefully I can make it that far. It's just a lot of little things. Thank you everyone for joining me, and we'll see you tomorrow at 9 a.m. Same link.
Thank you.
Have a fabulous day.